The study door slammed open, and every candle in the room seemed to flicker at once. Lady Alara Whitmore stood in the doorway, her chest rising with anger, her eyes locked on the tall man seated behind the desk. Duke Gideon Blackwood did not rise. He did not even look surprised. He simply set down his pen and waited for her to speak. Her father had sent her here with a single instruction: agree to whatever the Duke proposed or watch their family lose everything. But Alara had not come to agree. She had come to refuse. "I will never marry you," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "Not now, not ever." The room fell silent. A clock ticked somewhere behind her, each second stretching longer than the last. Gideon studied her for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted, not anger, not offense, but a strange, quiet calm that unsettled her more than any argument could have. "That is an interesting thing to say," he finally said, standing and walking around the desk, "considering we have been married for 6 years. Alara laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "That is not funny." "I am not trying to be funny." He reached into a drawer and placed a folded document on the desk between them. Alara did not move to touch it. Her mind raced, searching for the trick, the trap, the reason this man would say something so absurd to a woman who had just humiliated him in front of his own staff. "My father and yours signed this when we were children," Gideon continued. "A private ceremony, witnessed and recorded. It was never undone. I only learned of it myself 3 weeks ago after my father's death when his private papers were opened." Alara finally stepped forward and picked up the document with trembling hands. She recognized her father's signature immediately. Her stomach turned. This was not a proposal she had rejected. This was a marriage she had never known existed, one that had been hidden from her for her entire life. "This is impossible," she whispered, though the paper in her hand said otherwise. "I understand this is a shock," Gideon said, his voice softer now. "I did not ask for this any more than you did, but the law does not care what either of us wants. As far as England is concerned, you are already my wife." Alara felt the walls of the study closing in around her. Every plan she had made for her future, every dream of choosing her own path, seemed to dissolve in an instant. She looked up at him, searching his face for deceit, but found only the same unsettling calm. "Why would our fathers do this?" she asked. "Why hide a marriage instead of simply announcing it?" "I do not know yet," Gideon admitted. "But I intend to find out, and I think you deserve the truth as much as I do." Alara wanted to scream, to throw the document into the fire and pretend this moment had never happened. But something in his words, the honesty in them, held her still. She had walked into this room ready to fight a stranger. She was leaving it bound to one instead, whether she liked it or not. "I refuse to simply accept this," she said finally. "I am not asking you to accept it," Gideon replied. "I am asking you to help me understand it." Outside, the wind picked up against the tall windows of Ashbourne Hall, and Alara realized with a cold certainty that her life had just changed forever, and there was no simple way to undo it. Alara did not sleep that night. She sat by the window of the guest chamber she had been given, the marriage document resting on her lap, reading it over and over as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less impossible. Her father's signature stared back at her, unwavering, undeniable. By morning she had made a decision. She would not run from this. She would understand it. She found Gideon in the estate library, surrounded by stacks of old ledgers and yellowed letters pulled from his father's private study. He looked as though he had not slept either. "You are still here," he said without looking up. "I want answers," Alara replied, sitting across from him. "If I am truly your wife, then I deserve to know why." Gideon slid a bundle of letters toward her. "These belong to my father. I have been going through them since midnight. There is a pattern here, one I do not fully understand yet, but it involves your grandfather." Alara opened the first letter carefully. The handwriting was formal, distant, but the content made her breath catch. It spoke of a large sum of money, an old business arrangement between their families, and a debt that had never been settled. "My grandfather lost his fortune years before I was born," she said slowly. "My father always said it was bad investments." "Perhaps," Gideon said, "or perhaps it was something else entirely." They worked through the morning in near silence, broken only by the rustle of paper and the occasional gasp of recognition. Slowly, a picture began to form, one far more complicated than either of them had expected. The marriage, it seemed, had not been arranged out of friendship or alliance. It had been arranged in secrecy, as though someone wanted the connection between their families buried where no one would think to look. "Why would anyone hide a marriage instead of announcing it proudly?" Alara asked. "That is what troubles me most," Gideon admitted. "A hidden marriage protects something or someone." As the days passed, Alara found herself returning to the library again and again, not entirely out of necessity. She had expected Gideon to be cold and distant, exactly as the rumors described him. Instead, she found a man burdened by responsibilities he never asked for, quietly determined to uncover the truth, even when it might damage his own family's reputation. One evening, as rain tapped gently against the windows, Gideon looked up from his papers and studied her for a long moment. "You do not have to stay and help me with this," he said. "You could return home and let the solicitors handle the rest." "I know," Alara said, "but I want to understand my own life. I think you understand that better than anyone." Something passed between them then, unspoken but unmistakable. It was not friendship exactly, not yet, but the beginning of something neither of them had expected to find in a marriage neither of them had chosen. Their quiet progress did not go unnoticed. Word had already begun to spread through society that the reclusive Duke of Ashbourne had a wife hidden away in his estate, a secret duchess no one had ever met. Whispers turned into open gossip within days, and gossip, Alara would soon learn, always attracted attention from those eager to use it for their own advantage. It was Gideon's own cousin, Lord Reginald Ashford, who arrived at Ashbourne Hall uninvited one afternoon, his smile polished and his intentions carefully hidden behind polite conversation. He congratulated Gideon on his sudden marriage with a warmth that felt entirely false, and his eyes lingered a moment too long on the old letters scattered across the library table. "How fortunate," Reginald said smoothly, "that such an old arrangement has finally come to light." Alara felt a chill at his words. There was something in the way he studied the documents, something hungry and calculating, that told her he already knew more than he was letting on. After Reginald left, Gideon closed the library doors and turned to Alara with a troubled expression. "He has always wanted this title," he said. "If our marriage is ever proven invalid, the succession would pass through his branch of the family instead of mine." Alara's pulse quickened. "You think he already knows why our fathers hid the marriage?" "I think," Gideon said carefully, "that he may be the reason it was hidden in the first place." They spent the following days retracing every document, every letter, searching for any mention of Reginald's involvement in the past arrangement. The deeper they searched, the clearer the picture became. Gideon's father had not simply borrowed money from Alara's grandfather years ago. He had taken it through deception, using a business scheme that left the older man financially ruined and humiliated. The secret marriage between Gideon and Alara, arranged when they were still children, had been meant as quiet repayment, a way to return stolen wealth to Alara's family without ever admitting to the theft publicly. "Your grandfather agreed to keep it hidden," Gideon said, reading from one final letter, his voice heavy with the weight of his father's actions. "In exchange for security for his daughter's future, meaning your mother and eventually you." Alara sat back, stunned. Her entire childhood, the quiet struggles her family had faced, the whispered arguments about money she had never understood, all of it traced back to a debt disguised as a marriage. And Reginald knew, she said. Reginald has always known, Gideon replied grimly. And now that our marriage has come to light, he intends to use that same secret to destroy us both, either by proving the marriage was built on fraud, or by convincing society that I am unfit to hold the title at all. Alara felt something new rise inside her, no longer fear, no longer confusion, but a sharp and steady determination. She had come to Ashbourne Hall refusing to be anyone's wife. Now she refused to be anyone's victim. Then we stop him, she said firmly, together. Gideon looked at her for a long moment, something like respect flickering across his tired features. Together, he agreed. Reginald moved quickly once he realized his secret was no longer safe. Within days, invitations arrived from every corner of society for a grand ball hosted at his own estate, an event clearly designed to draw Gideon and Alara into public view, where Reginald could expose them both before they had the chance to defend themselves. Alara knew the moment she read the invitation that this was no ordinary gathering. This was a trap dressed in silk and candlelight. We could refuse to attend, she said, packing the library floor. If we refuse, he will simply spread his version of the story without opposition, Gideon replied. We need to face him directly with proof in hand. They spent their remaining time gathering every document that mattered, letters, ledgers, and a written confession they had finally uncovered from an old family solicitor who had witnessed the original theft decades earlier. It was enough to prove the truth beyond doubt, if they could present it at the right moment. The night of the ball arrived cold and clear. Ashbourne's grand hall glittered with candlelight and quiet music, but Alara felt none of the usual excitement such an evening might bring. Her heart pounded as she walked beside Gideon through the crowd, aware of every whispered conversation, every curious glance thrown their way. Reginald found them quickly, his smile as polished as ever. I am so pleased you both could attend, he said loudly, drawing the attention of nearby guests. There has been so much curiosity surrounding your sudden marriage. Then let us satisfy that curiosity, Gideon said calmly, stepping forward. Before Reginald could steer the conversation elsewhere, Alara raised her voice, clear and confident, silencing the surrounding chatter. She spoke of the old debt, the quiet theft disguised as friendship, and the hidden marriage meant to correct a wrong that had been buried for years. She held up the solicitor's written confession for all to see, her hands steady despite the weight of every eye in the room. Reginald's composed expression cracked for the first time. He tried to protest, to twist her words, but the proof in her hands left little room for doubt. Murmurs spread quickly through the crowd, no longer curious, but accusing, directed squarely at the man who had hidden the truth for his own gain. By the end of the evening, Reginald's reputation lay in ruins, his claims to the title exposed as nothing more than a desperate attempt to seize what was never his. Gideon's position as Duke stood stronger than ever, and for the first time since the truth had come to light, Alara felt something close to peace settle over her. Later, standing together on the quiet balcony above the fading music, Gideon turned to her with an expression she had never seen from him before, open, unguarded, honest. You did not have to fight for me tonight, he said. I did not fight for you, Alara replied softly. I fought for the truth. You simply happened to be standing beside me when I found it. A small smile crossed his face, the first genuine one she had seen since the night she stormed into his study. For what it is worth, he said, I am glad it was you standing there. In the weeks that followed, the scandal faded, replaced by quiet respect for both families. Alara realized, somewhere between the long nights spent uncovering old secrets and the evening she stood before all of society defending a marriage she never asked for, that her feelings toward Gideon had changed completely. What began as anger had grown into trust, and trust, she now understood, had grown into something far deeper. One quiet morning, Gideon asked her to walk with him through the estate gardens, the same gardens where their fathers had once signed the papers that bound them together as children. He stopped beneath an old oak tree and turned to face her. "We were married by our father's hands, not our own," he said. "I would like to change that if you are willing." Alara looked at him, at the man who had once been a stranger, then a mystery, and now something far more important. "I once told you I would never marry you," she said, a small smile touching her lips. "I think it is time I chose to." And there, beneath the quiet branches of the old oak tree, Alara Whitmore and Gideon Blackwood renewed a promise that had begun in secrecy and fear, choosing this time, freely and completely, to build a marriage neither of them would ever regret.